Right, so Pink Floyd's Roger Waters, we're back to this story again, has come in for substantial attacks once more over ridiculous, unfounded accusations of his rock opera The Wall being anti-Semitic and in poor taste, and attempts following included a legal case in Germany to get his concert banned, which failed because, of course, The Wall satirises Nazism and fascism and does it extremely well. Also, with Waters one of the world's most famous faces of pro-Palestinianism and BDS, a large part of the criticisms were coming from those with connections to the pro-Israel lobby, defending the indefensible and operating on an agenda of scaring people into silence by calling them racist. They're not scaring Roger very much. The Wall wouldn't still be performed, not least by Israeli tribute acts, no less, 44 years after its inception, if it didn't chime with a great many people across the world. If it didn't stand as a warning against what happened before, lest it be allowed to happen again, as well as offering an overtly pro-Palestinian political narrative these days along with it. The complaints continued as Waters' tour came back to the UK, of course, with Labour politicians calling for the Wall to be banned in Manchester, which again failed because it was just the most pathetic, dishonest demand to make, not stopping Keir Starmer rushing out a rabidly pro-Israel response at the behest of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, decrying Waters as anti-Semitic, libelling the man, in my opinion, putting himself at risk of legal action by Waters in turn, though no such action, fortunately for Team Keith, seems to have come their way, at least not as yet. I've covered all of this in detail in another video, of course, which you may have already seen, so I won't go back over all of that here. Please do go and watch that one if you haven't seen it. But now it seems the legal action could be on the other foot, and coming from another source entirely, and one you'd imagine to be a pretty unlikely one at that. The Anne Frank Foundation, or Anne Frank Stichting, is a foundation set up in the Netherlands to protect and preserve the Anne Frank house, where the wartime Jewish diarist Anne Frank hid with her family in a secret annex at the back of the property from 1942 to 1944, when Frank and her family were ultimately discovered. Anne Frank died in the Belsen Concentration camp in early 1945, aged just 15. Her diary, though, which has become her enduring legacy, is a solid reminder of the times she lived in, what it was like to be Jewish at that time and to be hunted down, and ultimately serve as a reminder to all of us to this day of the dangers of fascism, what it brings with it. This is why Roger Waters mentions her name, amongst so many others, at his Wall concert, victims of the very fascism that the Wall inherently opposes, that Waters himself opposes. However, it's one other name in particular that features in Waters' show of late that has given rise to encouragement, let's call it, for the Anne Frank Stichting to sue Waters. And that is bringing up the death of Shireen Abu-Akleh, the American-Palestinian journalist who, despite clearly wearing a press flak jacket, was fatally shot whilst trying to report an arrest operation by the Israeli Defense Force taking place in the Palestinian West Bank. Despite claims by Israel she was caught in crossfire, that it was Palestinian stray bullets that killed her, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the OHCHR, determined that a single bullet had shot Abu-Akleh's colleague in the shoulder before a second bullet shot her in the head, killing her. The statement from the OHCHR literally reads verbatim, Israeli forces were behind the fatal shooting of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu-Akleh in the West Bank, not indiscriminate Palestinian firing. However, in the eyes of some, and this is notably the UK LFI, UK Lawyers for Israel, I bet you can't see where this is going at this point, comparing Anne Frank by flashing her name on a board and Shireen Abu-Akleh by also flashing her name up on a board, Roger Waters is therefore guilty of comparing Israeli military action with that of Nazi Germany. They are not being directly compared, of course. There are many other people that Waters mentions in a similar way. For example, in the Manchester show just put on, he flashed up Julian Assange's name, imprisoned here in the UK as the US seek his extradition. They highlight the persecuted. They highlight the victims of atrocity. Comparing one atrocity to another is not the point when all events are atrocious. Still, some have sought to do so, and by some, this leads us back to the UK LFI, this UK Lawyers for Israel organisation, because of course, such an organisation exists, and they've apparently been in contact with the Anne Frank Stichting following the Wall concert put on in Berlin last month, urging them to sue Waters for, of all things, trademark infringement. Yes, the Anne Frank Stichting has trademarked Anne Frank, the name of a dead girl. They even sign off their correspondences using Anne Frank's own signature. Now, trademark is a funny thing, though. To trademark something, be that here or elsewhere, this requires you to choose a very specific class for what you wish
to register the trademark for with the Intellectual Property Office. And this is true whether it's the UK Intellectual Property Office, the UK IPO, or the European Union equivalent, the EU IPO, imaginatively. There are 34 different classes for business categories for trademarks, numbered 1 to 34, and 11 different classes for service trademarks, numbered 35 to 45. Now, there's a point to detailing all of that, because Anne Frank is registered under class 41, which is for education, entertainment, sporting, and cultural activities. That's a heck of a lot of scope. It's a very broad scope. And that makes proving a trademark infringement in this particular class very tricky. Now, the Anne Frank Stichting clearly is an educational institution. Roger Waters' concert would be entertainment first and foremost, I would imagine. You would think that there is an educational purpose behind that, although clear to us of sensitive to such things. There is no clear conflict here, even though both would fit in the same trademark class. But of course, here's the real nub of the issue. Roger Waters, for one, isn't trying to trademark the name of Anne Frank, so there's no infringement. Nor is he abusing the trademark, because he's highlighting the importance of the person herself, both through entertainment ways and educationally. So he's not abusing the trademark. He's keeping to the class that this trademark is registered in. And for another point, Anne Frank should not be somebody with her historical importance being reduced to just a flaming trademark. The UK LFI have written an article, and to my mind it is full of, well, let's call them misleading statements, in my opinion. Now, they mention Shireen Abu-Akleh in response to this comparison. Waters is allegedly making, as outlined already. This is a false narrative. It isn't about comparing the two, it's about remembering them and the atrocities that led to the deaths of both. Despite the OHCHR stating explicitly Israel was responsible for Abu-Akleh's death, the UK LFI only go as far as saying there's a high possibility it was Israel. The UK LFI claim Waters' display of their names was evidence of intention to imply both were killed by evil fascists, and the Israeli Defense Force, therefore, are like the Nazis. Well, both picked on minorities, but making said suggestion is intended merely to point to Waters as anti-Semitic. He's doing a lot of heavy lifting to try and point to him as an anti-Semite, given that comparison is against the, albeit flawed, IHRA definition of what anti-Semitism consists of. It's specific. You cannot compare Israel to the Nazis. The claim Waters dressed up as an SS officer in their article. He did not, and he never has. He parodies one, and his uniform is a parody of an officer. And their article also specified class 41 of trademarking as being for entertainment purposes, conveniently leaving out the fact it also covers education and sports. Their wording, in fact, is Anne Frank Stichting, registered Anne Frank, as a trademark inter alia in class 41 is for entertainment services. I bet they bloody didn't register it for entertainment purposes, actually. But trademarking someone's name, let alone Anne Frank, it just feels so wrong. It's an act to prevent her being spoken about except in very specific contexts. And there's a large part of me that's thinking, how dare you? In fact, the EU IPO felt similarly, clearly, as they revoked the trademark Anne Frank back in 2018, ruling that the Anne Frank Stichting had not actually made good use of the trademark over the preceding 5 years. It exists in our trademark list still here in the UK, hence the UK LFI having a wibble about it. Yet the Anne Frank Stichting likely not having made a peep about the wall being performed in Europe anywhere, and not for decades, clearly, not least when Roger and co were last in Amsterdam with the show at that. It's not like the UK LFI haven't got form for overreaching on such things, though. Back in March, they threatened legal action against Chelsea and Westminster Foundation Hospitals Trust over an arts display produced by children at the hospital school. A display of 21 ceramic plates painted by the kids both at the hospital and in Gaza, called Crossing Borders, a Festival of Plates, the theme being one of solidarity with Britain and Palestine. They were produced in 2012 and had even been displayed as far away as Sweden. Such was the quality and high regard of the project and the work produced. For 11 years, the plates have been on display in London before the UK LFI suddenly became aware of them, got offended about it, and threatened legal action until they were taken down, having submitted a complaint on behalf of Jewish patients who had apparently felt vulnerable and victimised by a display of plates. A petition is going around to get them rehung, but I think the fear of litigation means that's unlikely to happen. Do I think Roger Waters will get sued as UK LFI want to? I somehow doubt it. I don't think any case brought by the Anne Frank Stichting would carry a huge amount of weight on a trademark perspective. But if UK LFI are so sure of themselves, they can always try their own luck
with litigation against Waters, or is taking down school artwork the extent of their threats? Decide for yourself. And after you've liked, shared and subscribed to the channel to keep up to date with the latest things going on here in Tory Britain, here's more on that Roger Waters story as told in the only way I know how, my style, as my recommended video. You may have already seen it, and if so, hundreds of others videos here to see besides that. And I will hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.